A variation on prediction markets can directly inform decisions and be the basis of a new form of government that I'm going to call Futarchy. Consider this diagram. The two arrows on the left represent two markets, wherein users can bet on the claim S and not S, where S says whether some particular region adopts a single-payer medical system. Those markets estimate the probabilities of S and not S. The two arrows on the right represent markets which bet on the claim L, which says whether lifespans will rise in this region. But these right-side markets bet on L conditional on S, and thus give conditional chances of increased lifespan, if and if not a single-payer plan is adopted. If these two estimates differ, that difference offers direct decision advice on which single-player choice is more likely to increase lifespans. I call this sort of setup a decision market, and it has many promising applications. All we need is a discrete decision that we expect to make, and some outcome that we hope that decision may influence. Then speculators can tell us which decision option gives the most of that outcome. Note that we don't ever need to know if this decision caused this outcome. It is enough to know speculators' prior conditional expectations. Here's a real example. Early on in the 2016 US presidential election, there were betting markets in many candidates, markets that gave the chance for each candidate both of becoming their party's nominee and of becoming president. The ratio between these gives the conditional chance of becoming president if nominated. And this gives direct advice to these parties on who to nominate if they want to win the election. As another example, at one point, Bitcoin was considering making a change to its block size. And a decision market was created in our SciCast system on if this would increase the total value of all Bitcoins. Alas, I have no idea how much this influenced their actual choice. Here is how I would spend $1 million if I had it. Please give it to me. In an ordinary stock market, one trades cash for stock. To estimate the stock price, traders try to think of all the scenarios that the firm might later end up in and ask how much revenue the company would earn in each scenario, and then weigh them all together. For each firm in the Fortune 500, I would create 2 new conditional stock markets. These markets would also trade stock for cash, but these trades are called off if or if not the CEO stays in power until the end of the current quarter. When trading in these markets, traders should still ask themselves how much revenue the company will earn in each scenario, but now they will only weigh the scenarios consistent with each market's condition. The difference between the prices in these two markets offers direct advice to the firm's board of directors. Does the CEO add value to this firm, or should they be replaced? After a few years of running these markets, we could compare the average financial return of firms that followed this market advice to the firms who did not, and then maybe shame or sue boards of directors into following such market advice. If firing CEOs isn't big enough to excite you, let me raise the stakes. Let me say how we could use speculative markets to run the government. I call this Futarchy. I do this to try to inspire you with just how far this idea could go, but I'm not proposing that we do this immediately. Instead, I think we should try small-scale trials of this sort of mechanisms and then work their way up to bigger trials as the smaller ones seem to work. Okay, here's a simple argument for Futarchy. First, in the long run, it is not actually that hard to tell rich, happy nations from poor, miserable ones. If you travel around the world today, you can roughly see. Second, governments largely fail by adopting bad policies, which they adopt because they don't listen to the people who did or could know that these are bad policies, which were more likely to lead to poor, miserable outcomes. Third, speculative markets are our best known way to get everyone to tell us what they do or could know. Put this all together, we should put speculative markets in charge of picking policies. Here's a diagram of our current form of government. Voters at the bottom elect representatives who form a legislature that passes bills that become law if courts approve their constitutionality. These voters and legislators are informed by a variety of information institutions, including academia, news media, and organized interest groups. Now here is a diagram of my alternative. On the left side, we use the same structure as today to vote on values. An elected legislature passes bills, but now these bills only define national welfare. and oversee an agency like our Bureau of Labor Statistics to measure this number. National welfare is somewhat like GDP, but may include more kinds of statistics. For every month, the agency declares a precise number, saying what our welfare was for that month. And national welfare is defined as some weighted average over these future months. On the right side of this diagram, we have decision markets, where speculators decide if they expect each particular bill to increase national welfare. If they so expect, and if courts approve, the bill becomes law. Every day there are several time slots for considering a new bill, and there's even an auction to pick which bill is considered in each slot. So now we vote to decide what outcomes we want, but we trust market speculators to tell us which policies are most likely to get us what we want. Yes, there are some complications, some of which are addressed here. For example, there might be errors in the national welfare definition, errors that are only revealed when we see particular proposed bills. To prevent us from taking immediate and harmful action based on such errors, I've included a way that speculators can veto bills today based on a future-defined national welfare. Now, I know from long experience that as you've been listening, most of you have collected a few concerns in your mind about my proposal, and you won't be comfortable until those are addressed. Some of your concerns may be listed here, and some of them may be listed here. I think I've heard them all and have decent responses to most, but you won't know that until you hear them, which is why my main academic paper on this topic is mostly filled with responses to 25 different objections. Let me conclude by admitting what I see as Futarchy's biggest problem. It is bad at hypocrisy. Today, voters can pretend that they care a lot about trees, for example, but then consistently elect politicians who know that voters don't really mean it and would punish politicians who promoted trees too much. If low support for trees in policy were ever clearly exposed, voters could declare outrage and then blame corrupt politicians. But under Futarchy, we'd have to declare our tree priorities more clearly in our national welfare definition. So we'd either have to admit that we don't really like trees that much, or continue the pretense at a much higher cost, as Futarchy would be effective at giving us what we say we want, even if that isn't what we really want.
If you want to learn more about public choice, check out some of our other videos